The change began in her eyes. The green irises lost their color, dissolving into something else entirely. They became windows to somewhere else, swirling vortexes of cosmic dust and light. Stars formed in their depths. Entire galaxies seemed to spin within her gaze. Nebulae bloomed and died in the space of a heartbeat. It wasn't a reflection. It was a view into something vast and ancient. The metallic restraints that held her wrists and ankles began to soften. They didn't break or snap. They melted. The hardened alloy turned liquid, dripping onto the medical table like wax. The straps lost their tension, falling away without sound. No heat source explained it. No force was applied. The material simply stopped being solid. She rose from the table. Her movements weren't human. Too fluid, too precise, no wasted motion. She didn't push herself up. She just ascended, as if gravity had forgotten her. Her feet touched the floor without sound. She stood there surveying the room with those impossible eyes. The galaxy swirls continued their slow, ancient dance. When she spoke, her voice held the same calm tone. But something had changed. Deeper resonance, more frequencies, as if multiple voices spoke through one throat. I can feel all of you. The words hung in the air, simple and devastating. She wasn't looking at anyone in particular. She was looking through them. The neural monitors went wild, not with the chaotic patterns of seizure or overload, with structure. Complex mathematical sequences scrolled across the screens. Fractal geometries, quantum probability matrices, equations no living being should be able to generate consciously. The scientists stared at the displays, trying to make sense of it. They couldn't. This was beyond their models, beyond their science. Her mind wasn't just active. It was expanding, building connections at an exponential rate. Synapses firing in patterns that mirrored cosmic structures, neural pathways forming like constellation networks. She was thinking in dimensions they hadn't conceived of, processing information on a scale that defied measurement. This wasn't the super soldier they'd designed. Not a weapon, not an asset, something else entirely. The serum hadn't just enhanced her physical and mental capabilities. It had unlocked something fundamental, something that might have always been there, waiting, human potential amplified beyond any known limits. The room fell utterly silent. The humming machinery seemed to quiet in reverence. The guards held their weapons but didn't raise them. The scientists stopped checking readings. They just watched. They understood on some level that they were witnessing something unprecedented, not just in their lab, in the known universe. She turned her head slowly, those galaxy eyes scanning each person in turn. She didn't need to speak again. Her presence said everything. The balance of power had shifted completely. They were no longer the controllers. They were the observed, the test subjects. And she was running the experiment now. The transformation was complete. But the real change was just beginning. She took a step forward. The floor didn't creak. The air didn't move around her. She existed differently in space now, occupied it without disturbing it. She was here but also elsewhere, present but also vast. Her consciousness didn't just expand. It overflowed. It left her physical form behind like an outdated container. The mental boundaries that separated her from the rest of the room dissolved. She wasn't just aware of the scientists and guards. She was aware as them. The neural link formed instantly. No handshake protocol. No permission request. One moment they were separate individuals. The next their minds were connected. A network of consciousness with her at the center. The scientists felt it first. A sudden awareness of each other's thoughts. Not vague impressions. Clear, distinct mental patterns. Like hearing someone else's internal monologue in your own voice. The lab's controlled experiment became something else entirely. A shared mental space, a collective experience. Dr. Pelro found himself suddenly remembering technician Rel's childhood on a methane farm. Rel, in turn, felt Pelro's secret anxiety about his daughter's illness. Private thoughts became public domain. Personal memories became communal property. There was no hiding, no privacy. The mental barriers they'd spent lifetimes building meant nothing. They could feel each other's fears. The security chief's concern about his mortgage payments. The junior researcher's dread of failing her probation. The lead geneticist's hidden pride in bypassing 3 safety protocols. All laid bare. All accessible. The mental noise was overwhelming at first. A cacophony of worries, ambitions, secrets. Then Leliana began organizing it, structuring the chaos, making sense of the collective consciousness. The web extended throughout the facility. She touched minds in adjacent labs, maintenance crews, kitchen staff, even the security team in the armory 3 levels down. She knew their thoughts, their memories, their loyalties. She understood the facility's entire social structure in seconds. Who was ambitious? Who was afraid? Who could be trusted? Who couldn't? She demonstrated her access with devastating precision. She looked at Commander Vrazak's assistant. Your sister's name is Kyla. You send her half your salary every cycle. The assistant froze. Nobody knew about his sister, nobody. She turned to the head of security. You regret not taking that transfer to the Frontier Fleet. His hand went to his sidearm, then stopped. What was the point? She knew everything. This wasn't mind reading. It was deeper, more intimate. She wasn't extracting information. She was joining their consciousnesses, experiencing their memories as they experienced them, feeling their emotions as they felt them. The distinction mattered. She wasn't a thief stealing secrets. She was a guest in their minds, an invited one, whether they liked it or not. The power this gave her was absolute, more effective than any weapon, more controlling than any threat. She didn't need to torture information out of anyone. She already had it. Every secret doubt, every hidden shame, every private ambition. She knew who had cut corners, who had faked results, who had betrayed colleagues. The truth of everyone in that room belonged to her now. She stood calmly at the center of the mental storm she'd created. The galaxy swirls in her eyes seemed to pulse in time with the neural activity around her. She wasn't just a transformed human. She was a living network, a consciousness that had expanded to include others. The experiment had succeeded beyond their wildest dreams and their worst nightmares. The balance of power had shifted irrevocably. They had tried to create a weapon. Instead, they'd created a witness, one who saw everything, knew everything, and remembered everything. The lab was no longer a place of science. It was a courtroom, and she was both judge and jury. The truth was her evidence, their own minds her witnesses. Leliana turned her cosmic gaze toward the observation deck. She didn't need to access his mind forcibly. Commander Vrazak's thoughts came to her like an open transmission. She saw the entire operation laid bare in his memories, not as official records showed it, but as he had built it. Year by year, lie by lie, the facility wasn't Confederation approved. It was his personal project. He'd been siphoning resources for years. Weapons research budgets redirected. Materials diverted from decommissioned ships. Personnel assigned to phantom projects. He built this lab in secret, far from oversight committees and ethics boards. This was never about advancing science. It was about advancing his own power. Dr. Pelrose's constant references to Confederation approval were part of the deception. A script Vrazak had written for him. The head scientist genuinely believed they were working within regulations. He'd been fed falsified documents, counterfeit authorization codes. He was a pawn who thought he was a knight. The truth was much simpler. This was a black operation, completely off the books, totally deniable. The 16 previous deaths weren't just tragedies. They were crimes. Each failure had been covered up. Accident reports falsified, bodies disposed of without documentation. Families told their loved ones died in training exercises. Vrazak's ambition had overridden every safety protocol, every ethical boundary. He viewed the losses as acceptable collateral damage, the cost of doing business. His own subordinates didn't know the full extent of his deception. The security chief thought they were testing advanced medical treatments. The technical staff believed they were working on voluntary subjects from penal colonies. Only Vrazak knew they were kidnapping civilians from undeveloped worlds. Only he understood the complete disregard for Confederate law. Leliana saw it all. The secret accounts, the hidden transfers, the manipulated personnel files. She accessed his private logs where he detailed his plans to use the successful subject as his personal enforcer, a weapon to eliminate political rivals, a tool to seize control of entire sectors. He wasn't building a soldier for the Confederation. He was building a dictator's right hand. She didn't accuse him aloud. She simply began sharing his memories with the room, projecting them into the collective consciousness she now controlled. The scientists saw the falsified budget reports, The guards felt his contempt for protocol. Everyone experienced his calculated disregard for life. The truth landed with the force of a physical blow. The room went still. The humming machinery sounded like an accusation. Vrazak stood frozen at his observation window. He could feel his own thoughts being broadcast, his private ambitions becoming public knowledge, his carefully constructed empire of lies collapsing in real time. He reached for the emergency purge button, the one that would vent the entire lab into space. His hand wouldn't move. Liliana held him in place with a thought, not with force, with understanding. She knew what he would try before he did. She now possessed something more valuable than enhanced abilities. She held evidence. Complete, verifiable, undeniable proof of his crimes. Every transaction. Every deception. Every life lost. It was all there in his mind and now in hers. The power dynamic had shifted completely. She wasn't just a test subject who had survived. She was a witness who remembered everything. And she wouldn't be silenced. The two guards at the exit stood frozen. Not like statues. Worse. They were fully conscious, fully aware, but their bodies wouldn't respond. Their fingers hovered near weapon triggers they couldn't pull. Their legs refused to bend. Their eyes tracked her movement, wide with confusion. They were prisoners in their own armor. Liliana hadn't touched them, hadn't threatened them. She simply redirected their neural commands. Their motor functions answered to her now, not them. Her influence extended beyond thought reading. She controlled physical movement through pure neural override, not through force but through understanding. She knew the exact synaptic patterns that controlled their limbs, knew how to intercept those signals, how to reroute them. The guards remained standing, fully armed, completely helpless. A demonstration of power that required no violence. Just better wiring. The command center doors hissed open without anyone touching the controls. No panel lit up. No mechanism engaged. The heavy security doors simply slid aside as she approached, like they recognized her authority more than any access code. The systems responded to her neural presence the way metal responds to a magnet. Naturally. Inevitably. The lab's security measures, designed to contain threats, now facilitated her movement. She began walking toward the facility's core. Her steps were measured, purposeful, not hurried, not aggressive. She moved with the certainty of someone who knew exactly where she was going and what she would find there. The galaxy swirls in her eyes pulsed faintly with each step. She didn't look back, didn't check to see if anyone followed. She didn't need to. The scientists and guards fell into step behind her. Not like prisoners, not like devotees, like components of a larger system falling into alignment. They moved in unison, their steps matching hers perfectly. No one spoke. No one resisted. Her control wasn't coercion. It was compulsion. She created a neural rhythm they couldn't help but follow. Their individual wills remained intact, but their actions synchronized with hers. They were still themselves, just harmonized. The lab transformed around them. What had been a sterile chamber of scientific inquiry became a procession of consequence. The empty containment pods they passed looked like monuments to failure. The humming servers seemed to hold their breath. Every piece of equipment, every monitor, every weapon felt like part of the audience now. Witnesses to the reckoning. She spoke without turning. I'm leaving this facility. No one will attempt to stop me. The statement wasn't a threat. It was a fact. She'd already ensured it was true. The neural web she'd woven throughout the complex made resistance impossible. Anyone who thought about intervening found their body refusing the command. Their own biology betrayed them, not through pain or force, through better communication. The procession moved through the corridors with eerie precision, boots hitting deck plates in perfect unison, breath cycles matching, even heart rates synchronizing. She wasn't dragging them along. She was conducting them. Like an orchestra where she was both composer and conductor, they played their parts perfectly because she understood the music better than they did. She turned their own assets against them seamlessly. The security systems that should have contained her now cleared her path. The personnel who should have resisted now followed. The technology that should have recorded her movements instead recorded their compliance. Every safeguard, every protocol, every weapon became part of her exit strategy. She used their own infrastructure against them without damaging a single component, without raising her voice, without firing a shot. The facility that had been built to control her now served her completely. The transformation was absolute. The test subject had become the director. The prisoner had become the warden. And she was walking out the front door with everyone's blessing. Even if that blessing was neural rather than voluntary, the outcome was the same. She was leaving. And they were helping. The Galactic Confederation faced its most severe decision in millennia. This wasn't about border disputes or trade agreements. This was about fundamental policy, about whether to embrace the unknown or retreat behind ancient safeguards. The isolation protocol sat on the table like a loaded weapon. It hadn't been used in 50,000 years, not since the Xylos incident, when contact with a predatory species nearly collapsed 3 sectors. The precedent was clear. The risk was absolute. Supreme Counselor Duer sat at the head of the council chamber, his features set in diplomatic neutral. He watched Admiral Chorus pace near the strategic display. The Admiral's biomechanical joints whirred softly with each turn. The Andorian ambassador sat perfectly still, her multiple eyes blinking in sequence. The Vexillian representative floated in its containment field, chromatophores shifting with unease. They all understood the stakes. This wasn't theoretical. This was happening now. Humanity presented a unique problem. Their cognitive diversity was unprecedented in Confederation records. Most species evolved toward mental uniformity. Humans specialized in variation. Their minds worked differently across individuals. Some thought in patterns, others in abstractions, some in emotions. This made them unpredictable, dangerous, but also potentially invaluable. The scientific applications alone could revolutionize fields from quantum mechanics to consciousness studies. They weighed the potential for protection against the risk of predation. Humanity's home system occupied a strategically valuable position. Their integration could create a buffer zone against outer rim threats. Their military adaptability, if properly directed, could strengthen Confederation defenses significantly. But if misdirected, if turned against the established order, the damage would be catastrophic. They'd seen what one transformed human could do. An entire species of them presented an equation with too many variables. Ileliana's transformation proved human resilience beyond any projection. Their models predicted 17 failures. They got one success that defied categorization. She wasn't just enhanced. She was transformed, elevated. Her abilities suggested human consciousness might operate on principles other species hadn't developed. Their minds might be more flexible, more adaptable, more capable of integration with advanced technologies. The serum didn't create something new in her. It unlocked something that was already there. The Council struggled with precedent versus potential. Their laws favored caution. Their history taught isolation. But their current situation demanded innovation. The Confederation hadn't faced a true existential threat in centuries, but stagnation posed its own dangers. They needed new perspectives, new capabilities. Humanity might provide both, or they might introduce chaos into a system that valued order above all. The debate would determine Earth's fate for centuries. Full integration meant access to technology, knowledge, and protection. It also meant scrutiny, regulation, and potential cultural domination. Isolation meant independence, but also vulnerability. Left to develop on their own, humanity might become a threat simply through ignorance, or they might evolve in directions the Confederation couldn't anticipate. Neither option was safe. Both carried profound consequences. The choice boiled down to a simple binary: isolate a potentially dangerous species and maintain the status quo, or integrate an unknown quantity and embrace change. The council chamber remained silent as the weight of the decision settled over them. 50,000 years of precedent said one thing. The potential swimming in one human's eyes said another. They had to choose, and their choice would echo across the stars for generations. She entered the council chamber without escort. The galaxy swirls in her eyes had dimmed to a soft shimmer. She wore simple diplomatic attire, not battle armor. Her posture was straight but not aggressive. She looked like an ambassador, not a weapon. The assembled delegates watched her carefully. They expected a demonstration of power. She gave them a slight, formal bow instead. "I come before you not as a product of illegal experimentation," she began, her voice calm and clear, "but as evidence of human resilience." She didn't deny what had been done to her. She acknowledged it directly, took ownership of it. What was intended to create a weapon instead created a bridge. Between your people and mine, between what was and what could be. She framed Earth not as a threat but as an opportunity. A species that had evolved under unique conditions. One that thought differently, solved problems differently. You sought to control that difference. I propose we learn from it instead. Her words were measured, precise. She spoke with the weight of someone who understood both sides of the equation. The fear of the unknown, the potential of the untested. Her humility disarmed them. She made no demands, issued no threats. She simply presented the facts as she knew them. The illegal lab. The 16 failures. Brazek's deception. She laid it all out without accusation, without anger. She was a witness, not a prosecutor. Her tone suggested collaboration, not confrontation. The council had prepared for aggression. They expected demands, ultimatums. What they got was an offer. My transformation proves human cognitive plasticity exceeds your models, she stated. This isn't a flaw. It's a feature. One that could benefit us all. She proposed a partnership, a chance to study what made her different, to understand how human minds worked, to apply that understanding to Confederation problems. She challenged their basic premise directly. You're debating whether to punish my species or isolate it. I suggest a third option. Work with us. She looked at each delegate in turn. Her gaze was steady but not threatening. Punishment assumes malice. Isolation assumes danger. What if you assume potential instead? Her display of power was subtle but unmistakable. As she spoke, the chamber's translation systems began operating at unprecedented efficiency. Delegates found themselves understanding nuances they normally missed. Cultural context. Emotional subtext. The systems weren't just translating words. They were translating meaning. She wasn't doing it forcefully. The system simply worked better in her presence. Like metal aligning to a magnetic field, she kept all possibilities open. Made no attempt to dominate the conversation. When delegates asked pointed questions, she answered directly. When they expressed concerns, she acknowledged them. She treated their fears as valid rather than dismissing them. Her approach was inclusive rather than confrontational. She reframed the entire discussion around trust. You don't need to trust humanity because we're virtuous. Trust us because it's practical. Our differences complement yours. Our weaknesses offset your strengths. She presented integration as a strategic advantage rather than a moral imperative. The assembly watched her with new perspective. They saw capability tempered with restraint. Power matched with wisdom. She wasn't what they expected. She was better, more dangerous in her way, because she offered exactly what they needed, not what they feared. Cooperation instead of conquest, partnership instead of predation. The conversation shifted imperceptibly, from damage control to opportunity assessment, from containment to collaboration. She had given them a new framework, and they were starting to use it. The negotiations had reached an impasse. Delegates argued protocols. Admirals cited security concerns. Scientists debated theoretical risks. Eleliana sat quietly through it all, her galaxy swirl eyes half closed. She seemed to be listening to something else entirely. Then she murmured a single phrase almost to herself. The Proson entanglement. I've solved it. The room went completely silent. The Proson quantum entanglement issue had baffled Confederation physicists for 47 standard cycles. It represented a fundamental barrier to faster-than-light communication. The problem wasn't theoretical. It was practical. Their equations worked on paper. They failed in application. Every attempt to create stable entangled pairs across interstellar distances ended in signal decay. The best minds from a dozen species had tried. All failed. She hadn't been working on the problem openly. She'd been turning it over in her transformed mind while the diplomats talked, blending human intuitive leaps with advanced alien mathematics. Her cognitive capabilities allowed her to see connections others missed. Patterns in the chaos, solutions in the noise. She processed variables at a rate their computers couldn't match. Her brain wasn't just thinking. It was computing on a quantum level. The solution emerged fully formed. Not as a theory. As a practical application, she described the necessary modifications to the entanglement initiators, the precise calibration of quantum spin states, the exact timing sequence for pairing particles across light years. Her explanation was concise, technical, authoritative. She spoke like someone who had already tested it, who knew it would work. This wasn't theoretical capability. This was practical value. Tangible progress. The kind that could be measured, tested, implemented. The Proson solution meant instantaneous communication across the entire Confederation. No more lag. No more delayed responses. Military coordination would improve exponentially. Scientific collaboration would accelerate. Trade routes could be managed in real time. The implications were staggering. The scientific delegates recognized the significance immediately. Their professional skepticism vanished. This wasn't political posturing. This was breakthrough science. The head of the Confederation Science Directorate stood up from his seat. His chromatophores flashed brilliant blue, the Vexillian equivalent of shock. That would actually work, he said. His voice held something no diplomat had managed to achieve all day. Wonder. The atmosphere in the chamber shifted completely. Arguments about security protocols suddenly seemed trivial. Concerns about human unpredictability sounded short-sighted. Here was proof that human cognition, when properly integrated, could solve problems that had stumped the Confederation for decades. This was the partnership Liliana had promised. Not in theory. In practice, the breakthrough became the turning point. Delegates stopped talking about containment and started talking about collaboration. The conversation pivoted from risk management to opportunity assessment. Military advisors began calculating the strategic advantages. Economic ministers started estimating productivity gains. Scientists were already sketching diagrams on their datapads. Liliana had changed the entire negotiating landscape with 7 words. She hadn't threatened, hadn't demanded, hadn't even raised her voice. She simply demonstrated what was possible. The Proson solution became more than a technical achievement. It became evidence, proof that human integration wasn't a risk to manage. It was an opportunity to embrace. The delegates looked at her differently now. Not as a threat, not as a weapon, as a partner, one who had just given them the keys to the next era of galactic civilization. The Council reached its decision. Not full integration, not isolation. A third path. They endorsed a probationary period for Earth. Observer status granted limited access to Confederation resources and knowledge. It allowed trust building without demanding immediate surrender of autonomy. Both sides maintained their safeguards while exploring cooperation. The agreement marked a definitive pivot from coercion to partnership. Observer status came with specific conditions. Earth could access non-military technology databases. They could send representatives to scientific conferences. They received limited diplomatic protections. In return, they agreed to Confederation monitoring stations in their system. They accepted oversight on technological development. The framework was designed for measured, gradual integration. No sudden changes. No dramatic shifts, just careful, documented progress. Liliana would serve as special advisor during the transition. Her role was unique. She reported directly to the Council, but represented human interests. She operated outside normal diplomatic channels. Her authority came from demonstrated capability rather than formal position. She became the living bridge between 2 civilizations. Her office was established on a neutral station orbiting between systems. Neither fully Confederation nor fully Earth territory. This compromise was unprecedented. The Confederation had never attempted such an arrangement. Previous first contact scenarios followed strict protocols, full membership after extensive evaluation, or complete isolation with no contact. This middle path acknowledged both potential and risk. It recognized that human capabilities might justify exception to standard procedures, but it also protected the Confederation from unforeseen consequences. The agreement set new precedent for how unknown species might be incorporated. It created legal frameworks for provisional membership. It established evaluation criteria beyond simple threat assessment. Future species contact would follow this model. Gradual integration with reciprocal safeguards. Mutual benefit balanced against mutual risk. The Council had effectively rewritten 50,000 years of diplomatic policy. Earth now operated within a structured testing period. They had to demonstrate their value beyond theoretical potential. Their technological advancement would be monitored, their social development tracked, their compliance with interstellar law verified. The probation wasn't punishment. It was verification, proof that humanity could function as responsible galactic citizens. The safeguards protected both sides. Earth maintained control over their own development. They could refuse technology transfers they deemed too dangerous. They could set boundaries on cultural exchange. The Confederation maintained oversight to prevent uncontrolled escalation. They could intervene if human technology threatened galactic stability. The balance was delicate but workable. Implementation began immediately. Monitoring stations were deployed to the outer solar system. Communication arrays established direct links between Earth and the Council. Scientific exchange programs started accepting applications. The first human diplomats began training programs. Everything moved deliberately, cautiously. The framework ensured nothing happened too quickly. Earth's position was unique among known species. They weren't members. They weren't outsiders. They occupied a new category entirely. Provisional participants. Test case civilization. The entire galaxy watched to see how the experiment would unfold. Success meant rewriting the book on first contact. Failure meant reaffirming ancient isolation protocols. The structure was set. The rules were clear. Now came the hard part. Making it work. Building trust through action rather than promise. Demonstrating capability through results rather than potential. Earth had its chance. The Confederation had its safeguards. And between them stood one transformed human, tasked with making sure neither side disappointed the other. Ileliana emerged as a central diplomatic force during the probationary period. She navigated the complex web of interstellar politics with an intuitive grasp of alien psychology. Her office became the hub for cross-species negotiations, problem-solving, and crisis management. Delegates from dozens of worlds sought her counsel. They found her advice direct, pragmatic, and unexpectedly insightful. She understood their cultural nuances better than they understood themselves. She became the first human to helm a galaxy-spanning alliance. The Harmonious Accord started as a minor trade agreement between 3 species. Under her guidance, it expanded to include 17 member worlds and 32 observer civilizations. She chaired the Coordination Council with quiet authority. Her decisions were firm but fair. She never favored human interests over others, but always found solutions that benefited all parties. The Accord became the testing ground for her unique approach to governance. Earth's ascent from outsider to participant happened with remarkable speed. Within the first year, human scientists were contributing to major research initiatives. By year 2, human engineers were helping retrofit Confederation vessels. By year 3, human diplomats were mediating disputes between ancient species. The probationary period became less about monitoring and more about collaboration. Earth wasn't just meeting expectations. It was exceeding them. The Harmonious Accord's diplomatic fleet approached Earth with full ceremony in the 3rd year. 43 ships representing 28 species entered the solar system. Their approach was carefully coordinated. Every maneuver followed strict diplomatic protocol. The vessels gleamed in the sunlight, their diverse designs reflecting the variety of civilizations they represented. It was the largest alien fleet ever to visit Earth, and it came in peace. Ileliana's composure reflected the weight of the historical moment. She stood aboard the lead vessel, her galaxy swirl eyes observing the approach. She showed no nervousness, no pride, only focused attention. She monitored the fleet's formation, the communication channels, the cultural sensitivities. She made slight adjustments to the arrival sequence based on real-time assessments. Her calmness steadied the entire operation. She guided cross-species governance with unprecedented skill. Her neural capabilities allowed her to process multiple perspectives simultaneously. She could understand a Vexillian's mathematical reasoning while appreciating an Andorian's emotional concerns. She mediated disputes by finding common ground others missed. Her solutions were often elegant in their simplicity. Complex problems that had stalled for cycles were resolved in days under her guidance. Human creativity complemented Vexillian intelligence strategically. The 2 species formed an unexpected partnership. Vexillians provided the computational power and systematic thinking. Humans offered the intuitive leaps and unconventional approaches. Together, they solved engineering problems that had baffled Confederation experts for decades. Their collaboration became the model for interspecies cooperation. Other civilizations began seeking similar partnerships. The alliance extended beyond simple cooperation to joint problem-solving. When a plasma storm threatened the Cygna shipping lanes, human and Vexillian teams worked together to develop a navigation solution. When a biological agent contaminated an agricultural world, human medical researchers partnered with Andorian biologists to create a cure. Each success built trust. Each solution demonstrated the value of diverse perspectives working together. Knowledge exchange accelerated scientific progress exponentially. Human researchers gained access to Confederation databases. Alien scientists studied human cognitive patterns. The cross-pollination of ideas led to breakthroughs in energy generation, materials science, and medical technology. Research that would have taken decades unfolded in months. The probationary period became one of the most productive scientific eras in recent history. The 3 years demonstrated the viability of the partnership beyond any doubt. The safeguards remained in place, but they were rarely invoked. Monitoring stations reported peaceful development and responsible innovation. Earth had proven itself not through promises, but through consistent action. The probation was succeeding better than anyone had anticipated. The experiment was working. Supreme Counselor Dur observed the development with careful attention. He noted the paradox developing around Eleliana's influence. She had become the most powerful voice in Confederation politics without seizing a single office, held no formal military command, controlled no strategic resources. Yet when she spoke, entire sectors listened. When she suggested a course of action, councils adopted it. Her power emerged organically, naturally, without force or threat. She maintained her role as bridge rather than conqueror. Her position remained special advisor. She never sought higher rank, never demanded more authority. Delegates came to her because they valued her counsel, not because they feared her displeasure. She resolved disputes through mediation, not decree. She built consensus rather than issuing commands. Her approach was collaborative rather than directive. This distinction became her defining characteristic. Her leadership arose from consent and partnership. Species followed her guidance because it proved effective, not because they were compelled. Civilizations adopted her solutions because they worked, not because they were ordered. Her authority was earned through consistent results. Demonstrated capability, reliable judgment. She built trust through action rather than extracting it through fear. This voluntary alignment made her influence more durable than any command structure. This distinction solidified her unique position in Confederation politics. She operated outside normal hierarchies, answered to no single government, represented no specific world. Her loyalty was to the partnership itself, to the idea that different species could achieve more together than apart. This neutrality gave her counsel weight across political divides. Both hardline traditionalists and progressive reformers sought her input. She became the one voice everyone would listen to. Some began calling her Emperor Chorus. The title emerged from diplomatic circles. It underscored her unprecedented influence across the Confederation. The term wasn't official, wasn't sanctioned, but it spread through the networks. It captured the reality of her position. She guided policy across multiple sectors, coordinated military responses without holding rank, directed scientific initiatives without formal authority. The title reflected what she was, not what she claimed to be. Yet she never sought that title or the power it implied. When delegates used the term in her presence, she corrected them. Gently but firmly. She remained Special Advisor Reeves in all official communications. Her office maintained its modest staffing. Her conduct stayed consistent with her role. The power was real, but her rejection of its trappings was equally genuine. This disconnect between influence and ambition became part of her legend. Her authority emerged from demonstrated capability rather than force. She solved the Proson entanglement, mediated the Cygnus border dispute, coordinated the response to the plasma storm crisis. Each success built her reputation. Each solution demonstrated her value. Delegates followed her guidance because it produced results. Admiration replaced apprehension. Respect replaced fear. Her power grew because she delivered what she promised. The Confederation had never seen leadership quite like this. Previous influential figures had built power bases, controlled fleets, commanded armies, held political offices. She controlled nothing but her own counsel, commanded nothing but respect, held no office but advisor. Yet her influence surpassed many who held formal power. She redefined what leadership could mean in a galactic civilization. She demonstrated that true power could emerge from service rather than domination. That influence could flow from capability rather than coercion. That authority could be earned rather than seized. Her example challenged centuries of political theory. Forced a re-evaluation of how civilizations organize leadership, she proved that in the right circumstances, the most powerful person in the room might be the one who never raised their voice, never issued a threat, never claimed a title. The paradox became her greatest strength, and the Confederation's most valuable lesson. Earth joined the Confederation as a full member world with full rights and responsibilities. The vote was unanimous. No abstentions. No objections. 3 years of probation had demonstrated their value beyond any doubt. The monitoring stations remained, but their purpose shifted from oversight to coordination. Earth now stood equal to civilizations that had been spacefaring for millennia. The transformation was complete. The experiment had succeeded. Eleliana continued serving as humanity's representative and primary innovation driver. Her office expanded to handle the increased responsibilities. She maintained her role as special advisor to the Confederation Council while representing Earth's interests. Her unique position allowed her to facilitate knowledge exchange and resolve disputes before they escalated. She became the living embodiment of the partnership between humanity and the wider galaxy. Her guidance proved invaluable during the transition period. The final negotiation anchored a vision of complementary capabilities. The agreement recognized that human cognition offered unique problem-solving approaches. It formalized partnerships between human researchers and alien scientists. It established joint military training exercises that leveraged human adaptability. The framework ensured both sides benefited from the arrangement. Earth gained technology and protection. The Confederation gained new perspectives and capabilities. The balance was carefully constructed to maintain mutual advantage. Human resilience proved invaluable in Confederation strategic planning. Their ability to adapt to unexpected situations became a tactical asset. Military commanders began incorporating human officers into planning teams. Their unconventional thinking helped solve complex operational problems. Disaster response teams included human personnel for crisis management. Their capacity for improvisation under pressure saved lives during several emergency situations. What had been viewed as unpredictability became recognized as flexibility. The partnership demonstrated unprecedented collaboration models. Human Vexillian research teams achieved breakthroughs in quantum computing. Human Andorian medical collaborations developed new treatments for neural disorders. The cross-species working groups became case studies in effective interstellar cooperation. Other member worlds began adopting similar partnership frameworks. The Earth Confederation model became the new standard for interspecies collaboration. It proved that diversity could be a strength rather than a weakness. Earth's inclusion marked a new era for both humanity and the Confederation. For humans, it meant access to technologies that would have taken centuries to develop independently. For the Confederation, it meant integrating a species with unique cognitive capabilities. The relationship changed both parties fundamentally. Humanity gained perspective on its place in the universe. The Confederation gained a partner that challenged its assumptions and expanded its possibilities. Membership came with access to technology and knowledge previously unimaginable. Human scientists gained entry to the Galactic Library, containing millions of years of research. Engineers received schematics for gravity manipulation and energy generation systems. Medical researchers accessed biological databases covering thousands of species. The information transfer was carefully managed to prevent cultural shock or technological misuse. The exchange proceeded gradually under Eleliana's supervision. Humanity gained a voice in galactic affairs for the first time. Earth representatives joined the Confederation Assembly. They participated in policy debates and strategic discussions. Their perspective brought fresh ideas to ancient institutions. They questioned traditions that no longer served their purpose. They proposed innovations that improved efficiency and effectiveness. Their presence changed the conversation in the chamber. The assembly became more dynamic, more adaptive, more responsive. The Confederation gained a partner with unique cognitive abilities. Human problem-solving approaches complemented existing methodologies. Their intuitive leaps balanced systematic analysis. Their emotional intelligence enhanced logical decision-making. The combination proved remarkably effective. Complex issues that had stalled for cycles found resolution. Innovation accelerated across multiple fields. The partnership demonstrated that different thinking styles could achieve more together than separately. This was the culmination of Aleliana's transformed journey. From test subject to diplomat, from prisoner to representative. Her personal transformation mirrored humanity's journey. Both had been forced to change. Both had emerged stronger. Both had found their place in a larger community. Her quiet leadership had guided the process at every step. She remained the bridge between worlds, the living proof that difference could become strength. That transformation could lead not to destruction, but to evolution. The title of Emperor Chorus emerged quietly from diplomatic channels. It wasn't official, never recorded in any registry or proclaimed in any hall, but it spread. It captured the reality of her influence. She guided policy across dozens of worlds, coordinated fleets without holding rank, directed scientific initiatives without formal authority. The term wasn't about domination. It was about recognition, acknowledgement of her role in shaping galactic civilization. Yet she consistently rejected the imperial connotations, maintained her official title as special advisor. Her power came from partnership, not command. She never issued decrees, never demanded obedience. Her authority flowed from demonstrated capability, from solutions that worked, from guidance that proved reliable. She led through consent rather than coercion, influence rather than intimidation. This distinction defined her approach entirely. Her ascent demonstrated a new model of leadership, hybrid mind governance, a blend of human intuition and alien logic. She thought across species boundaries, understood cultural nuances instinctively, made decisions that considered multiple perspectives simultaneously. Her transformed cognition allowed her to process complexity at levels others couldn't match. She didn't just represent multiple species. She embodied their combined potential. She consistently steered toward collaboration rather than domination. When conflicts arose, she mediated rather than dictated. When crises emerged, she coordinated rather than controlled. Her focus remained on building consensus, finding common ground, creating solutions that benefited all parties. She proved that power could be exercised through facilitation rather than force. That influence could be earned through service rather than seized through ambition. The last test subject had become what they called the last emperor. The terminology reflected their cultural framework, not hers. In their history, emperors ruled through strength and expansion. She governed through cooperation and inclusion. The title was ironic almost, a recognition that her influence surpassed their traditional rulers, even as her methods contradicted their expectations. She accepted the term without embracing its meaning. This signaled a fundamental shift in power structures. Authority no longer required formal hierarchy. Influence didn't demand military strength. Leadership could emerge from capability rather than position. Her example challenged centuries of political theory, forced a reevaluation of how civilizations organize governance, proved that sometimes the most powerful person in the room might be the one who never claims authority. The universe had changed because one human accepted transformation. Not just physical change, conceptual change. She demonstrated that difference could become strength, that vulnerability could become power, that cooperation could achieve more than conquest. Her journey from lab subject to galactic leader rewritten the rules of engagement between species, set new standards for first contact and integration, created possibilities that hadn't existed before. Her quiet vow to guide rather than command defined everything. She saw leadership as service rather than privilege, influence as responsibility rather than right. This philosophical approach shaped every decision she made, every policy she influenced, every relationship she built. Her power grew because she never sought it. Her influence expanded because she never demanded it. The paradox became her greatest strength. The age of the last emperor began not with conquest but with handshakes, with trade agreements rather than treaties of surrender, with scientific collaboration rather than technological domination. It was an era of partnership rather than predation, of mutual advancement rather than unilateral control. The title itself became a historical footnote. What mattered was the change it represented, a shift in how civilizations could interact, how power could be structured, how leadership could be exercised. The emperor didn't rule, she served. And in serving, she transformed everything. The formal ceremony began with 43 ships holding formation around Earth. They represented every major species in the Confederation. Their hulls gleamed in the sunlight. Their weapon systems remained powered down. This wasn't a show of force. It was a display of unity. The entire fleet moved in perfect synchronization. No communication delays, no coordination errors. The Proson entanglement solution made this precision possible. Eleliana's first gift to the galaxy. She stood at the helm of the lead vessel. Her posture remained composed. Her galaxy swirl eyes observed every detail. She monitored the formation, the communication channels, the cultural protocols. She made micro-adjustments through neural commands. Her influence guided the entire operation without visible effort. She wore simple diplomatic attire, no medals, no insignia. Her authority needed no decoration. The weight of history rested visibly on her shoulders. She understood the significance of this moment better than anyone. This wasn't just a ceremony. It was the culmination of her entire journey. From lab subject to galactic representative, from prisoner to partner, her calm demeanor hid the enormity of the transition. She carried the memory of the 16 who hadn't survived to see this day. Their absence was present in her every decision. This marked the official beginning of Earth's Confederation era. The monitoring stations shifted from oversight to support roles. Earth representatives took their seats in the assembly. Human scientists accessed the full galactic library. The probationary period ended not with evaluation, but with celebration. The integration was complete. The partnership was formalized. Earth stood as equals among species that had traveled stars for millennia. The ceremony demonstrated the Confederation's capacity for growth and adaptation. Ancient protocols had been rewritten, traditional boundaries redrawn. The Council had embraced change rather than resisting it. They had chosen innovation over tradition. The entire governmental structure had evolved to accommodate a new kind of member, a new way of thinking, a new approach to galactic civilization. Humanity's place among the stars was now formally recognized, not as subjects, not as protégés, as partners, as contributors, as equals. The recognition came with responsibilities and rights, with voice and vote, with access and obligation. Earth would help shape galactic policy, would contribute to collective defense, would share in scientific advancement. The isolation was over. The collaboration began. This event would be remembered across species for generations. Historians would study the images. Diplomats would analyze the protocols. Scientists would examine the technology exchanges. The ceremony became the new standard for first contact integration, a model of how to bring new civilizations into the galactic community, with respect rather than domination, with partnership rather than control. Eleliana's journey found its culmination here, the test subject who became the bridge, the prisoner who became the diplomat, the human who became more while remaining human. Her transformation had changed not just her. It had changed the entire Confederation, had changed humanity's destiny, had rewritten the rules of interstellar relations. Her personal story became galactic history. The dawn of this new era began with a handshake, not a weapon. Supreme Counselor Dur extended his multi-jointed limb. The President of Earth reached out with a human hand. The gesture was simple, symbolic, meaningful. No treaties signed at gunpoint. No surrenders demanded. No concessions extracted. Just two civilizations acknowledging each other as equals, as partners, as fellow travelers among the stars. The handshake was transmitted across the galaxy. It became the image that defined the new era. Cooperation over conflict, partnership over predation. The future had arrived. And it began with an open hand. Eleliana's transformation left fundamental scientific questions unanswered. The Confederation established a dedicated research initiative to study what made her different. They weren't trying to recreate her. They were trying to understand her. The serum had produced 16 failures and one anomaly. Their models couldn't explain the discrepancy. Standard genetic analysis showed identical baseline parameters. Something else had determined the outcome. Something their science couldn't measure yet. Her ability to solve the quantum entanglement issue suggested capabilities far beyond initial projections. The Proson solution hadn't come from enhanced intelligence alone. It emerged from a different kind of thinking entirely. Her neural patterns showed simultaneous processing across multiple cognitive domains. She didn't solve problems step by step. She perceived solutions whole, like seeing the entire picture at once rather than assembling pieces. This suggested her mind operated in dimensions they hadn't conceived of. The neural network she created during the initial transformation might be expandable beyond known limits. During the lab incident, she connected with every mind in the facility simultaneously. The range seemed limited only by her attention. With practice, with focus, that range might extend further. Planetary scale, system-wide, perhaps even interstellar. The implications were staggering. Instantaneous communication across light years, shared consciousness between species. The barriers they thought were fundamental might be negotiable. Human cognitive diversity might hold more secrets yet undiscovered. Eleliana represented one data point, one human who survived the serum. Billions more remained untested. Their mental variations might produce different but equally valuable transformations. Some minds might excel at spatial reasoning, others at temporal manipulation, others at biological integration. Humanity wasn't a monolithic cognitive type. It was a spectrum of possibilities, each potentially offering unique capabilities. The serum's effects might be replicable under different conditions. Frazak's formula had been crude, brutal, designed for control rather than enhancement. Refined under proper ethical guidelines, with better understanding of neural compatibility, it might produce consistent results. Not necessarily identical to Eleliana's transformation, but potentially other stable outcomes, other enhancements, other ways to unlock human potential without the catastrophic failure rate. Her choice of diplomacy over domination raised profound philosophical questions. She had absolute power at multiple points, could have seized control of the Confederation easily. Instead, she built partnerships. This suggested something fundamental about human consciousness. Their morality wasn't just cultural. It might be neurological, hardwired into their cognitive architecture. The desire for cooperation over conquest might be a feature, not a bug. This changed how they assessed new species entirely. The Confederation wondered what other breakthroughs she might facilitate. The Procyon solution had revolutionized communication. What other intractable problems might yield to her unique perspective? Energy generation, medical technology, temporal physics. Each field had its unsolvable equations, its impossible barriers. Her transformed mind might see pathways others missed, find connections hidden in plain sight, turn theoretical possibilities into practical applications. Her unique position between species created entirely new possibilities. She wasn't just human anymore, wasn't entirely alien either. She occupied a middle ground, a bridge consciousness. This allowed her to mediate in ways pure humans or pure aliens couldn't. She understood both perspectives instinctively, felt both cultural contexts simultaneously. This hybrid awareness might be the key to deeper integration, to true understanding between species that thought differently. The full implications of her transformation were still unfolding. They had witnessed the initial change, the neural expansion, the diplomatic achievements, but the long-term effects remained unknown. How would her capabilities evolve over time? Would they stabilize? Expand further? Would new abilities emerge? The research continued. The observation continued. The mystery continued. They had answers. But the questions kept multiplying, each discovery opening new avenues of inquiry. The story wasn't over. It was just entering its next chapter. The 16 previous failures weren't forgotten in her success. Eleliana made sure of that. She accessed the lab's sealed records and identified each subject by name, recovered their origins and their stories. They weren't just numbers in a report anymore. They were individuals with histories and families. Their sacrifice became part of the official record, a permanent reminder of the cost of ambition without ethics. She ensured their sacrifice was acknowledged and honored throughout the Confederation. Memorial services were held across multiple worlds. Their names were added to the Galactic Honor Roll. Families received formal apologies and compensation. The ceremonies weren't grandiose. They were simple, respectful, acknowledging that these beings mattered, that their loss meant something, that they wouldn't be erased from history just because the experiment eventually succeeded. Their stories became part of Confederation history and ethics training. Military academies incorporated the case study into their curriculum. Scientific institutions used it for research ethics seminars. The 16 failures became cautionary tales about oversight and responsibility. Their experiences illustrated the dangers of unchecked ambition, the importance of consent, the value of every life regardless of species or status. They became teaching tools to prevent similar tragedies. The laboratory was converted into a memorial and research facility. The containment pods remained, but with new placards explaining what happened there. The main chamber became a meditation space, The observation deck now hosted educational tours. Scientists could study the site's history while conducting ethical research. The transformation was symbolic. A place of suffering became a place of learning, a monument to both failure and redemption. New protocols were established for ethical experimentation. The Confederation implemented strict oversight requirements for all research involving sentient beings. Independent review boards gained expanded authority. Consent procedures were standardized across species. Penalties for violations became severe. The reforms weren't suggestions. They were mandatory, enforceable, designed to prevent another Vrzak from operating in the shadows. Vrzak's actions became a case study in oversight failure. His methods were analyzed in security briefings. His psychological profile was dissected in command training. The systemic flaws that allowed his operation to continue were identified and addressed. He became the example of what happens when ambition overrides ethics. When personal gain outweighs collective good, his name became synonymous with institutional failure across the Confederation. The legacy included both the tragedy and the transformation. The 16 who died and the one who lived. The suffering and the salvation. The darkness and the light. You couldn't have one without the other. The story was complex, messy, human in its way. It showed that progress often comes at a cost. That redemption often emerges from failure. That the path forward isn't always straight or clean. Humanity's introduction to the galaxy came through this complex history. Not through ideal first contact. Not through peaceful exploration. Through conflict and suffering and transformation. This shaped how other species viewed humans, not as innocent newcomers, not as ruthless invaders, as survivors, as adapters, as beings who could endure terrible things and emerge changed but not broken. It wasn't the story they would have chosen, but it was the story they got. The story served as warning and inspiration across species, a warning about the dangers of unchecked ambition, about the cost of sacrificing ethics for progress, but also an inspiration about resilience. About transformation, about the possibility of change. Different species took different lessons from it. Some focused on the precautions, others on the potential. The story became what they needed it to be. Subject 17's number became synonymous with transformation against odds. It entered the galactic lexicon. To pull a 17 meant to overcome impossible circumstances through adaptation. To turn failure into opportunity. To transform under pressure. The number lost its clinical connotation, gained new meaning. It became a symbol of hope, of possibility, of the idea that even in the darkest places change can happen, that even the broken can become whole again, that even the lost can find their way home. The last test subject became what they called the last emperor through consent, not conquest. She seized nothing, commanded no fleets, held no official rank, yet she guided policy across the galaxy. Her power came from partnership, from solutions that worked, not threats that intimidated. Her journey proves true influence emerges from service, not domination. It shows real strength lies in building bridges instead of weapons. Remember that transformation begins with a simple choice. Cooperation over conflict, understanding over fear, building connections rather than burning them down. That's how you change the universe, without firing a shot. She was dragged into the lab as their final test subject, another disposable human in a line of failures. But when the serum began rewriting her genetic code, something unprecedented happened. Her eyes began swirling with galaxies and she calmly declared, "I can feel all of you." This wasn't just another transformation. It was the birth of a consciousness that could reshape the entire Confederation. Commander Vrzak's laboratory stood cold and silent. A graveyard of 16 failed experiments. The metallic air tasted of sterilization and regret. Each sterile tray and diagnostic panel told the same story. Bodies burned out, minds erased, potential wasted. The staff knew the numbers and they knew the cost. There were no second chances here, only statistics. Scientists moved through the room like ghosts, their motions tight and efficient. They avoided eye contact with one another, and with the empty containment pods lining the walls. Everyone understood the risk. One wrong mixture, one miscalibrated injection, and it wouldn't just be the subject who suffered. The entire wing could vent into space. Their focus was absolute, not out of passion but necessity. Fear was a tangible presence, thick as the ozone from the humming machinery. Security teams stood at their posts. Weapons powered but held low. Their orders were clear. Contain any outcome, especially the noisy ones. They'd done it before. 16 times, in fact. Each incident report was a lesson in failure, a reminder that ambition often outruns control. Commander Vrazak watched it all from the observation deck, his expression unreadable. To him, the subjects weren't people. They were variables. Expendable ones. The project itself was on its last legs. Funding had been slashed, oversight increased. This was it. The final authorization, the last draw from the black budget. One more attempt. Either they produced a viable result, or the whole operation was terminated. Permanently. The atmosphere wasn't just tense, it was brittle. Like glass under pressure waiting for the fracture. Then the doors slid open. 2 guards escorted her in. Subject 17 human, last of the line. She didn't struggle, didn't plead. She just observed. Her eyes tracked the room, the equipment, the people. She took it all in with a calm that felt out of place. Like she knew something they didn't. Vrazak gave the signal. Prep began immediately. No ceremony, no words of reassurance. Just procedure. They guided her toward the central chamber, the one they called the cradle. It still smelled of the last subject, burnt wiring and something organic, something sweet. The techs worked fast, securing restraints, attaching monitors. Their hands were steady, but their silence said everything. They'd done this before. They knew how it usually ended. This was the final roll of the dice. Either they achieved what 16 others had not, or the project died here. And with it, possibly, their careers, their freedom, maybe their lives. Failure had consequences in black operations, success even more. They brought her in restrained, but she didn't fight. Eleliana Reeves walked like she owned the corridor, her eyes cataloging everything. The reinforced bulkheads, the weapon mounts, the nervous twitch in the head guard's hand. Her copper short hair caught the harsh light, and those green eyes didn't blink. They assessed, calculated. She wasn't scanning for exits, she was studying them. The lab techs expected fear. They got scrutiny. When Vrazak gave the order to begin preparation, she didn't flinch. She watched the syringe being loaded, the monitors calibrated, the restraints checked. Then she spoke. Her voice was level, almost conversational. "You people don't believe in consent, do you?" One of the junior scientists froze mid-motion. Nobody had ever questioned the process before. They were used to screams. Not commentary. Most civilizations ask before sticking foreign substances into other beings, she continued, her tone dry. But I suppose asking would require admitting this isn't voluntary. Her words hung in the air, sharper than any blade. The head scientist, Pelro, started to explain protocol, but she cut him off. "Save the speech. I know how this works. You need a result. I'm the last ticket." Her understanding unsettled them more than defiance would have. She saw the machinery of power clearly, the funding, the politics, the desperation. She recognized the guards weren't there to protect her, but to contain her. And she accepted it, not with resignation, but with a kind of weary amusement. Like she'd seen this play before and knew how it ended. The room grew tense in a new way. Earlier, the fear was about failure. Now it was about being seen. Really seen. Her gaze lingered on each scientist, each guard, as if she were memorizing their faces for later. One of the techs adjusted a sensor pad with trembling fingers. Another kept looking at the door. They were used to being observers, not the observed. Vrazak tried to reassert control from the observation deck. "Proceed with the injection." His voice crackled through the intercom, all ice and authority. Eleliana didn't even look up at him. She focused on the medic preparing the injector. "That going to hurt?" she asked. The medic flinched. "It's a standard delivery system," he stammered. She almost smiled. "Guess we'll find out." This wasn't going according to script. The previous subjects had cried or fought or gone silent with terror. This one was participating, critiquing, turning their procedure into a dialogue they hadn't prepared for. The power dynamic shifted subtly. They were no longer just testing a subject. They were being tested themselves. Their composure, their ethics, their very control. She leaned back against the restraint chair as if it were a throne. "Well, let's get this over with. I've got places to be." The sarcasm was a weapon they had no defense against. Humor, humanity, things their equations hadn't accounted for. The lab felt different now, colder somehow, and quieter. as if the air itself were waiting to see what she'd do next. Pelro delivered the briefing like he was reading from a technical manual. No emotion, no warning labels, just facts. The serum would rewrite her genetic code at the molecular level, strip out what made her human and replace it with something else, something they designed. He didn't call it a weapon, but they all knew. That was the point, 2 outcomes. That's what he said. Bifurcated result. She either died or she changed. No middle ground. No partial success. The previous 16 had all taken the first option. Their bodies couldn't handle the rewrite. Systems failed. Minds collapsed. It was a brutal numbers game, and the house always won. Eleliana listened without interruption. When he finished, she just nodded. So I either die on this table or become your super soldier. She stated it plainly, like she was confirming a dinner reservation. No fear, no anger, just acceptance. Let's get to it then. Her pragmatism was colder than the steel table they had her strapped to. The injection process was mechanical. No ceremony, no countdown. A medic pressed the injector against her neck. There was a hiss of compressed air. The clear fluid entered her bloodstream. The scientists watched their screens. Everyone held their breath. The room felt like a tomb waiting for its occupant. Vitals flashed across monitors. Heart rate steady. Respiratory function normal. Brain activity baseline. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then the neural scan spiked. 42% increase in cortical activity. Impossible. Unprecedented. The lead neurologist checked his equipment twice. It wasn't error. It was happening. Alarms started blaring. Cellular breakdown warnings lit up the main display. Her body temperature began climbing. 103 degrees. 105. 108. The thermal sensors glowed red. She should have been seizing. Cooking from the inside. But she wasn't moving. Just lying there, perfectly still. Her skin took on a feverish glow. Beads of sweat evaporated before they could form. The air around her shimmered with heat distortion. The medical team looked to Vrazak for the abort order. He gave none. He watched, calculated. This was different from the others. The failures had been violent, loud. This was quiet, controlled. The room became a theater of tense silence. Technicians adjusted sensors. Guards tightened grips on their weapons. Everyone knew the pattern. The spike, the heat, then the crash. The biological cascade failure. They'd seen it 16 times. They braced for the 17th, but the crash didn't come. The temperature stabilized at 109 degrees. The cellular alarm stopped flashing. The neural activity kept climbing. 50% above baseline, then 60. The monitors couldn't keep up. Data streams overflowed. Systems started lagging from the input. Something was happening that shouldn't be possible. The serum was working, but not as designed. It wasn't just altering her. It was amplifying her, rewriting the code but adding new lines, expanding rather than replacing. The scientists exchanged uneasy glances. They'd prepared for failure. They hadn't prepared for this.